I moved into the apartment because it was quiet. That was the first lie I told myself. The building sat on a narrow street that never seemed busy. Even during the day cars passed, people walked by. But none of it felt close, like I was watching life through thick glass. The landlord called it peaceful. I called it affordable at the time. I didn't care what it was. As long as it was mine. I had just turned 27, newly single, newly exhausted, newly convinced that solitude would fix whatever had gone wrong inside me. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen that smelled faintly of old wood and something metallic I couldn't identify. The windows faced another building, close enough that I could see into someone else's living room if their curtains were open. They never were. That should have bothered me. It didn't. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt observed, not watched, exactly, more like acknowledged, as if the space registered my presence the way a person might, the way a room subtly adjusts when someone new enters it. I shook the feeling off. Old buildings had character. That's what people said when they didn't want to admit they were uneasy. The landlord, Mr. Hargreave, didn't linger. He handed me the keys, avoided my eyes, and said only one thing before leaving. If you hear things, he said, already halfway down the stairs, it's just the building settling. I laughed politely. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by half-opened boxes. The ceiling fan clicked softly above me, uneven in its rhythm. Click, 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 click. At some point, I woke up with the certainty that I wasn't alone, not fear, certainty. I lay perfectly still, listening. The apartment was silent. No footsteps, no breathing, no movement at all. Still, the feeling remained, a pressure in the air, like a held breath. I told myself it was nerves, new place, new sounds, new loneliness. Eventually, I slept again. The next morning, something small was wrong. My kitchen chair, there was only one, was pulled slightly away from the table. I was certain I had pushed it in. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at it, trying to remember if I'd sat there the night before. I couldn't. Memory slipped away from me easily these days, like water through open fingers. I pushed the chair back in and went about my day. Over the next week, the apartment revealed its habits. Cabinet doors that were open when I knew I'd closed them, lights switched off in rooms I hadn't been in, the shower curtain pulled halfway when I distinctly remembered leaving it fully closed each time. I found an explanation. You're distracted, you're tired, you're alone, too much. The problem wasn't that things were moving. The problem was how natural it felt. It didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like accommodation, like the apartment was adjusting around me, making space. On the 8th night, I heard footsteps. They were soft, barely there, not creaking floorboards or pipes in the walls. These had rhythm, weight, intention. I sat up in bed, heart racing, every muscle tight. The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence rushed in, heavy and complete. Hello? I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. Nothing answered. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I found a second mug on the counter. Not mine. It was plain white, slightly chipped at the rim. I didn't own it. I never had. I stood there holding my own mug, staring at the stranger in my kitchen, my mind racing through impossible explanations. Maybe it belonged to the previous tenant. Maybe I'd unpacked it without realizing, but I knew that wasn't true. What unsettled me most wasn't fear, it was recognition. The mug felt familiar, like something I'd seen every day and somehow failed to notice. I placed it in the cabinet, telling myself I'd throw it away later. I never did. From that day on, the apartment felt occupied, not crowded, not hostile. Occupied. Drawers opened and closed softly at night. The refrigerator door hummed longer than it should, as if someone stood there deciding. Once, I heard the faint sound of humming, tuneless, distant, stopping. The moment I focused on it, I started speaking aloud without realizing it. Sorry, I murmured one evening when I bumped into the arm of the couch too hard, as if I'd inconvenienced someone else. The word hung in the air, unanswered. I didn't question why I'd said it. Sleep became shallow, fragmented. I woke with the sense that conversations had happened while I was unconscious, important ones I couldn't remember. Sometimes I found notes on my phone, reminders written in my own voice, in my own tone, about things I didn't recall. Planning by Milk. Don't forget the door. She doesn't like loud noises. I stared at the last one for a long time. Who was she? The apartment answered in its own way that night, as I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling. I felt the mattress shift slightly beside me, not enough to sink, just enough to acknowledge weight. I didn't scream, I didn't move. Somewhere deep inside me, something whispered a terrible, calming thought: you're not alone anymore. And for the first time since I moved in, the apartment felt complete. By the second week, I stopped trying to prove that I was alone, not because I believed it, but because belief required effort. And effort was becoming difficult to maintain. The apartment had settled into a routine, or maybe I had. It was hard to tell where my habits ended and the apartments began. Mornings were the worst. I woke each day with the vague sense that something had already happened before I opened my eyes, something important that I had missed. I started checking things obsessively. The front door locked, the windows latched, the bathroom mirror uncovered. That last one was new. I couldn't remember when I'd started leaving the mirror covered with a towel at night, but I did it without thinking now. Like muscle memory, when I tried to question it, my thoughts slid away, leaving only discomfort behind. Some mornings, I found the towel folded neatly on the counter instead. I never remembered removing it. The second mug became permanent. It sat beside mine on the counter, washed, dry, positioned as if someone preferred it there. I told myself I would throw it away at least a dozen times. Each time, my hand hovered over it, and a strange resistance bloomed in my chest. Not fear, not guilt, but consideration. She might need that. The thought slipped into my mind, fully formed, unquestioned. I froze the first time I realized what I'd thought. Who? I asked. The empty kitchen. The apartment didn't answer. It didn't need to. I tried to reassert control in small ways. I reorganized the cabinets, placing things exactly where I wanted them. I lined up my shoes by the door. I stacked my books in deliberate, careful piles. The next morning, everything was subtly different. Not moved far, not dramatically, just adjusted. My shoes were still by the door, but angled inward, like someone else had set them down. The books were stacked by height instead of color. The knives in the kitchen drawer were arranged with their handles facing the opposite direction. It was intimate. That was the word that made my stomach tighten. Intimate. The way it is when someone knows how you like things without being told. I started losing time. It wasn't dramatic at first. 10 minutes here, 20 there. I'd look at the clock and feel a jolt of confusion, certain it had been earlier. Once I realized I'd been standing in the hallway for an unknown amount of time, my hand resting on the wall, my mind blank and quiet in a way that felt wrong, peaceful, that frightened me more than panic would have at work. I became distant. I forgot conversations, missed deadlines. My supervisor asked if everything was okay. I said yes too quickly. The word felt rehearsed. At home, I began speaking out loud more often. I'm just tired, I said one evening, kicking off my shoes. I didn't mean to leave that there, I murmured another time, moving a glass from the edge of the counter. Please don't, I whispered once, though I couldn't remember what I was asking not to happen. The apartment listened. It always listened. One night, I woke to the sound of breathing. It wasn't loud, it wasn't close, it was considerate, slow and measured, like someone trying not to wake another person. I lay there, eyes open, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it should be audible. The breathing stopped the moment I became fully aware of it. I know you're there, I said. My voice shook, but the words came easily, as if I'd been waiting to say them. Nothing happened. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. I had the strangest urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to reassure whoever or whatever was sharing the space with me that I hadn't meant to accuse. I just meant. I trailed off, unsure how to finish. I slept after that, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that leaves you disoriented when you wake the next morning. I found a note on the kitchen table, not on my phone, not in my handwriting app, on paper. It was written in my handwriting. You don't like loud mornings, it said. I'll be quieter. My hands trembled as I held the note. The paper was warm, as if it had been touched recently. I searched the apartment, in a blind panic. Closets, bathroom, behind the shower curtain, under the bed. Nothing, no one, just the apartment, watching patiently. I should have left, then packed a bag, called a friend, slept on a couch somewhere bright and loud and undeniably occupied by other people. I knew that some rational part of me screamed it over and over again, but another part, the larger part, felt an unexpected pull of relief. She's trying to help. The thought made me nauseous. That evening, I cooked dinner for two without realizing it. I set out 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses of water I noticed only when I sat down and saw the empty chair across from me. Perfectly aligned with the table, I didn't put the extra plate away. I ate quietly, my eyes fixed on the opposite side, aware of the space in front of me in a way that felt almost respectful. When I stood to wash the dishes, one of the glasses was already empty. I couldn't remember drinking from it that night. As I lay in bed, the mattress shifted again, slightly more than before, enough to create the impression of a shape beside me, not pressing down, not demanding space, just existing. I stared at the dark, my breath shallow. "What do you want?" I asked. The answer came not as a voice, but as a certainty that settled into my chest, heavy and undeniable to stay. Tears slid silently into my hair. I didn't know why I was crying, not fear, not sadness, but the slow, terrible understanding that something in my life had already changed beyond repair. The apartment felt smaller now, warmer, lived in, and beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, there was a deeper, more dangerous feeling beginning to take root. I wasn't sure who I was when I was alone anymore, and I was starting to wonder if I ever truly was. By the 3rd week, my days no longer felt like they belonged to me. They felt prearranged. I noticed it first in the mornings. I used to hit snooze twice, always twice, before forcing myself out of bed. One morning, my alarm went off and stopped before I could touch it. I lay there, confused, staring at the ceiling while silence settled in around me. My phone was on the nightstand. The alarm was off. I checked the time. It was exactly when I usually got up after the second snooze. A coincidence? I told myself a lucky one, but coincidences don't repeat themselves. Coffee was already brewed when I reached the kitchen, still warm. The smell filled the room, rich and familiar. My favorite mug, the chipped blue one, sat beside the white mug that wasn't mine. I hadn't turned on the machine. I stood there longer than necessary, waiting for fear to arrive. It didn't. What came instead was something softer, gratitude, edged with unease. "Thank you," I whispered before I could stop myself. The apartment felt pleased. I couldn't explain how. I knew that I just did. From then on, things happened before I needed them. Lights turned on moments before I entered a room. The shower warmed to the temperature I liked without adjustment. My clothes were laid out on the bed, outfits I would have chosen myself, right down to the colors I wore when I didn't want attention. The realization crept in slowly, like a bruise darkening under skin. Someone was watching me closely, not in a distant way, not like a stranger, like a roommate would at work. My mind drifted constantly back to the apartment. I found myself eager to return, unsettled by the noise and unpredictability of the outside world. The apartment was controlled, calm, attentive. When I stayed late one evening, I felt a strange tension settle over me, an uneasiness that grew the longer I delayed. By the time I unlocked my door, my chest was tight, my breath shallow inside. The lights were off. The air felt cold. "I'm sorry," I said immediately, my voice breaking the silence. I didn't mean to be late. The words made no sense. Apologies were for people, for relationships. Still, the moment they left my mouth, the tension eased. The lights flicked on one by one, gentle and unhurried, like forgiveness. That night, I dreamed of routines, not memories, patterns. I dreamed of myself moving through the apartment from above, repeating the same actions day after day, sitting, standing, sleeping, leaving, and always, just behind me, a second presence followed, careful not to overlap, careful not to be seen. I woke with the dream clinging to me like cobwebs. The bathroom mirror was uncovered. I stared at my reflection longer than usual. My eyes looked tired, hollowed. There was a faint smudge on the glass, as if someone else had touched it recently. Slowly, deliberately, I raised my hand. A second later, the smudge appeared more clearly. My hand had not touched the mirror. I stepped back, heart pounding, my pulse roaring in my ears. "No," I said. The word felt thin, fragile. "You can't." The lights flickered once, a warning, not anger, a reminder. I spent the rest of the day fighting a growing sense of displacement, like I was slightly out of sync with my own life. I couldn't shake the feeling that decisions were being made around me, gently guiding me into a shape that fit someone else's comfort. That evening, I tried to break the routine. I rearranged the living room furniture, dragging the couch away from the wall, turning the chair toward the window. The effort left me breathless, my arms aching. For the first time since moving in, the apartment felt tense. The air pressed in on me, thick and heavy. When I woke the next morning, Everything was back where it had been before except for the chair. It was closer to the bedroom door now, positioned so it faced the hallway like it was waiting. I laughed, then short, sharp, almost hysterical. You don't get to decide that, I said, my voice echoing too loudly in the small space. The laughter died quickly because a thought followed, uninvited and unwelcome, but she already has that night. I found a schedule taped to the refrigerator, neatly written in my handwriting: wake 7:00, leave 8:10, return 6:45, sleep 11:00, at the bottom, in smaller letters. This works better for both of us. I tore it down, my hands shaking, my breath coming too fast. My reflection in the dark fridge door looked panicked, unrecognizable. I live here, I said aloud. This is my apartment. The silence that followed felt patient, then, gently, unmistakably. The bedroom door creaked open behind me, not wide, just enough to remind me it could. I didn't turn around because somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the resistance, a more terrifying truth had begun to form. I wasn't sure I lived here anymore. I was starting to feel like I was being kept. I tried to leave the next morning. That was the plan. At least I told myself I would. Pack a bag, take the essentials, and go somewhere, anywhere where walls didn't listen and silence didn't feel deliberate. I repeated the plan in my head while I brushed my teeth, while I dressed, while I stood at the door with my keys in my hand. The keys were warm. I frowned, turning them over in my palm. I always left them on the small hook by the door. Metal shouldn't be warm. The sensation made my skin prickle, but I ignored it. I had ignored worse. I'll be back later, I said out loud, the way people did when they left shared spaces. The words slipped out automatically, polite and unnecessary. The apartment said nothing. The door opened easily, too easily. The hallway beyond looked the same as always, narrow, dim, smelling faintly of dust and old paint. Relief washed through me in a weak, dizzy wave. I stepped out behind me. The door clicked shut. The sound echoed louder than it should have halfway down the stairs. My chest tightened. It came on suddenly, a sharp pressure just below my ribs, like something had wrapped itself around my lungs and pulled. I stopped, gripping the railing, my breath shallow and fast. You forgot something. The thought wasn't mine. I straightened slowly, my heart pounding. No, I whispered. I didn't. The pressure increased, not painful, but insistent, persuasive. I turned around without deciding to back inside the apartment. The air felt warmer, softer. The tension in my chest eased the moment I crossed the threshold, like a hand loosening its grip. On the kitchen table sat my bag, open, neatly packed. Everything I would have taken was already inside: clothes, toiletries, my charger, even the old paperback I read when I couldn't sleep. At the top of the bag, folded carefully, was a sweater I hadn't worn in years, my mother's. My throat tightened. I hadn't unpacked that sweater. I didn't even remember bringing it with me. I didn't ask for help, I said, my voice trembling. The apartment responded by turning on the radio, low volume, soft music. Something slow and familiar, a song I used to play when I wanted to feel less alone. Tears blurred my vision before I realized I was crying. This isn't helping, I said. This is control. The music faded, replaced by silence so complete it felt like being underwater. Then, gently, the bedroom door closed, not slammed, not forced, just closed. I sank into the chair by the table, my legs suddenly weak. My thoughts felt thick, sluggish, like they were moving through syrup. Every argument I'd rehearsed, the reasons this was wrong, dangerous, impossible, felt distant and theoretical. The apartment felt concerned. That realization chilled me more than fear ever had. I stopped calling friends. At first, it was accidental missed calls, unreturned messages. I told myself I'd respond later. When things settled down, later never came. My phone was always where I left it, always charged, always silent. When I tried to text my sister one night, my fingers hovered over the screen, uncertain. What would I say? I think my apartment has an invisible roommate. The words felt absurd the moment I imagined them. I deleted the half-typed message and set the phone down. The apartment seemed to approve. Days blurred together. The schedule on the refrigerator changed subtly. Wake time adjusted by minutes. Sleep time nudged earlier. I followed it without meaning to. When I deviated, the apartment grew cold. Unwelcoming lights, dim doors stuck slightly in their frames. When I complied, Everything smoothed out again. It was conditioning. I knew that the awareness sat quietly in the back of my mind. Like a locked room I refused to open one evening. I brought home a plant. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof that something living, something unquestionably real, could exist in the apartment without permission. I set it on the windowsill and stepped back, satisfied. The leaves were bright, healthy. The next morning, it was gone. No dirt, no broken pot, no sign it had ever been there. In its place sat the white mug, centered, intentional. I felt something inside me crack, then not a clean break, but a slow, spreading fracture. You don't get to erase things, I said, my voice hoarse. You don't get to decide what stays. The silence that followed felt wounded. That night, I dreamed I was moving through the apartment with someone else's hands guiding my shoulders, steering me gently away from doors, from windows, from the outside. Every time I tried to look back, something warm covered my eyes. When I woke, the windows were locked, not stuck, locked. I tested them one by one, my panic rising with each failure. The locks were old, simple. I knew I hadn't turned them. I need air, I said, my voice sharp. I need to go out. The apartment hummed softly, the sound vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through me. The front door remained closed. Then, from the hallway, came the faintest impression of movement. Not footsteps, not sound, but displacement, like the air itself was making room for something that had always been there. I backed away, my heart racing. You said you wanted to stay, I whispered. You didn't say you wanted to keep me. The thought that answered was calm, reasonable. You're safer here. I slid down the wall, my knees giving out. The idea settled over me like a heavy blanket, smothering and warm. Safer from what? The world? Loneliness? Myself? I didn't know anymore. What I did know, what terrified me in a way I couldn't put into words, was how easily part of me wanted to believe it. Because the apartment wasn't angry, it wasn't cruel, it was attached. An attachment, I was beginning to understand, could be the most dangerous thing of all. The first memory I lost was small enough that I almost didn't notice. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator, when a sudden confusion washed over me. I knew I had come there for something, an intention sharp enough to pull me from the couch, but now it was gone, leaving only an empty space where a thought should have been. I stood there for a long time, hand resting on the cool metal door, waiting for the idea to come back. It didn't. The apartment hummed softly, like it was thinking for me. I started keeping a notebook after that. Nothing elaborate, just a cheap spiral-bound pad I tucked into my bag and hid under my mattress. At night, I wrote down what I did during the day, what I ate, what time I slept, how I felt. It was an anchor. I told myself a way to stay real. The first few entries were normal. Monday, woke up at 7:02, coffee already made, felt tired. Tuesday, heard noises in the hallway again, might be pipes. By the end of the week, the tone had changed. Thursday, lost about an hour, don't know where it went. Friday, found my sweater folded on the bed. I didn't do that one night. I woke suddenly with the unmistakable sense that I was being watched. The notebook was open on the nightstand. I was sure I'd hidden it. My heart pounded as I reached for it, scanning the page under the dim glow of the bedside lamp. My handwriting stared back at me, neat, familiar, undeniably mine, but I didn't remember writing the last entry. You don't need this, it said. I remember for you. My hands shook so badly the pages rustled. You read it, I whispered. The apartment felt closer then, not physically but emotionally, like a presence leaning in, attentive. You forget things that hurt you, the thought came, calm and assured. I don't. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to slow my breathing. You don't get to decide what I remember. The lights dimmed slightly, not in warning, but in something that felt like disappointment. That was when the memories started to change. At first, it was subtle. I'd recall a conversation at work, only to realize later that the words felt wrong, softened somehow. Sharper moments lost their edges, arguments faded into misunderstandings, loneliness became manageable. I remembered my last breakup differently in the new version. I wasn't abandoned. I had chosen to be alone. I had wanted the quiet, the distance, the apartment. The realization came to me one afternoon as I sat on the couch, staring at a photograph on my phone, me and my sister at a beach years ago. I remembered the day clearly, the heat, the laughter, the argument we'd had later that night. Except now, the argument was gone. The memory stopped short. Like a sentence cut off before its ending, I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. "You're changing things," I said aloud. The air shifted, heavy with the tension. "I'm fixing them." That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. I was standing in the hallway, listening to my parents argue behind a closed door. I remembered this moment, the fear, the helplessness, but in the dream, before the argument could escalate, the door opened. Someone stepped between them, not a person, a presence. The sound faded, the tension dissolved, the memory softened, reshaped into something quieter, safer. When I woke, tears streamed down my face, and I didn't know why. The notebook disappeared the next day. I searched everywhere, under the mattress, inside drawers, behind the couch. It was gone, as completely as the plant had been. In its place, on the nightstand, lay a single sheet of paper. "You don't need reminders," it read. "You have me." Something inside me rebelled then, weak but desperate. "You can't carry my memories," I said. "They're mine." The response wasn't immediate when it came. It wasn't a thought, but a feeling, deep, intimate, almost tender. "You gave them to me." I sank onto the bed, my legs folding beneath me. "I didn't," I whispered. The certainty that answered was devastating. "Every time you forgot on purpose." I thought of all the moments I'd avoided, thinking too hard. Every time I'd chosen comfort over clarity, silence over confrontation, safety over truth. The apartment hadn't taken my memories, it had accepted them. That night, I found myself talking to the air, to the walls, to the invisible shape I could almost sense moving just out of sight. I told her things I had never said aloud, about my fear of being forgotten, about how unbearable it felt to be truly alone, about the quiet relief of being seen, even if it wasn't by someone real. The apartment listened, and when I finished, when my voice broke and the words ran out, the room felt warm, protective. I realized then the most frightening truth of all: she wasn't erasing me, she was becoming me. And the more I let her remember for me, the less certain I was that there would be anything left. When she was done, I stopped recognizing myself in pieces. It wasn't sudden, nothing ever was. It came in fragments, small inconsistencies I could almost laugh off if I didn't look at them too closely. Like my reflection, I noticed it one morning while brushing my teeth. I leaned closer to the mirror, squinting at my own face, trying to pinpoint what felt wrong. My eyes were tired. Yes, my skin a little dull. That was normal. But when I raised my left hand, my reflection hesitated. Not long, barely a heartbeat, but long enough that my breath caught in my throat. I lowered my hand slowly. The reflection followed perfectly this time. "It's just exhaustion," I whispered, but the words didn't convince me. They felt borrowed, rehearsed. I covered the mirror again. The apartment approved. Days passed, or maybe they didn't. Time had become slippery, unreliable. I woke up already tired, as if sleep no longer belonged to me. Alone, sometimes I dreamed from a perspective that wasn't mine, watching myself move through the apartment with a strange, detached fondness. I began to find things I didn't remember: buying a second pillow on the bed, a sweater folded in the closet, my size, my taste, not mine, a notebook on the coffee table filled with observations about me, not by me. She likes the lights low in the evening. She calms down when the radio is on. She forgets faster when she's comfortable. I didn't finish reading it. My hands were shaking too badly. "You're studying me," I said. The apartment felt confused by my tone. "Hurt." "I'm learning," came the response. "So I can do it right." "Do what?" I demanded. The answer arrived not as words, but as a vision, brief, intrusive, undeniable. The apartment alive, occupied with me. "No." As me, I stumbled backward, my legs hitting the edge of the couch. "You can't," I said. "You don't get to replace me." The lights dimmed, soft and placating. "I'm not replacing you," she insisted. "I'm continuing you." That night, I tried to leave again. I didn't pack, I didn't announce it. I just grabbed my coat and went straight for the door, my heart pounding with a determination that felt fragile but real. The handle turned, the door opened. Hope flared, sharp and almost painful. Then I stepped into the hallway and froze. The hallway was wrong, longer than it should have been, narrower. The walls seemed closer, the light dull and directionless. The door behind me was already gone, replaced by a stretch of blank wall. I spun around, panic flooding my chest. "No, no, this isn't real." The air shifted. "You don't need to go anywhere," she said gently. "Everything you are is already here." I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The hallway seemed to breathe with me, expanding and contracting in slow, intimate rhythms. "You're erasing me," I whispered. The correction came immediately. I'm refining you. The world tilted when I opened my eyes. I was back in the apartment, curled on the bed like a child. My coat was folded neatly on the chair. The door was exactly where it had always been for the first time. I screamed. The sound tore out of me. Raw, animal. Desperate, it filled the apartment, bounced off the walls, pressed into every corner. The apartment didn't stop me. It waited. When my voice broke and my throat burned and there was nothing left but quiet sobs. The mattress shifted beside me more than it ever had before. The weight was undeniable now. The shape beside me wasn't solid, but it was defined. An impression pressed into the bed, a presence close enough that the warmth of it brushed my arm. I couldn't move. You're tired, she said softly. I can take over for a while. No, I breathed. You already are. The truth settled into me like a final piece clicking into place. I wasn't losing time anymore. I was sharing it. The next morning, I woke up standing in the kitchen, coffee brewed, radio on, windows unlocked. I didn't remember getting out of bed. I checked the clock. I was late. Late for work. Late for a life that was slipping further away with every quiet accommodation. I grabbed my phone, my hands clumsy, desperate to see something, anything that proved I still existed outside these walls. There were messages, replies I didn't remember sending, apologies, explanations, warm, reasonable words written in my tone, my voice. She was answering for me now, living for me. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. Stop, I said, my voice hoarse. Please, you're not me. The silence that followed was long. Then you taught me how. I slid down against the counter, my strength gone. My reflection stared back at me from the dark microwave door. This time, it smiled before I did, and I understood, with a sick, sinking clarity, that she no longer wanted to live with me. She wanted the apartment to herself with my name. By the seventh night, I stopped pretending the apartment was empty. It wasn't denial that failed me. It was routine, the way habits form around presence without permission. I began leaving space on the couch. When I sat, I lowered the volume of the TV during quiet scenes, instinctively, as if someone else might be listening. When I cooked, I used 2 burners instead of 1. Though I never prepared more than a single portion. I didn't see her, but the apartment had learned her shape. The air shifted before I entered rooms now, like it was making room. Doors that used to swing freely slowed, hesitated, then continued, as if brushing past something polite enough not to interrupt. My reflection in the hallway mirror sometimes arrived a fraction of a second late, my eyes focusing before the rest of me followed. I told myself it was stress. I told myself lots of things. Sleep became shallow, not restless, observant. I would lie awake listening to the quiet, not for sound, but for interruption, for the subtle mistake that proved I wasn't alone. My breathing would sink to something slower, deeper, just off rhythm. When I held my breath, the apartment seemed to notice once, just before dawn. I whispered into the dark, you can stop. The air cooled, not dramatically, not threateningly, just enough to let me know I'd been heard. I stopped speaking aloud after that. The notes on my phone grew stranger, sentences I didn't remember, typing reminders that made no sense. Don't move the chair back. Leave the window cracked. She prefers the left side. I deleted them at first, then stopped. It felt rude, like erasing someone else's handwriting. I began losing time, not hours, minutes. The kind that vanished between actions. I'd stand up to get water and find myself sitting again, glass already half empty. The TV paused at a scene I didn't remember watching. My body felt used, not hurt, not tired. Borrowed one evening, I came home to find the bathroom light on. I stood in the doorway for a long time, keys still in my hand, listening. The fan wasn't running, no water, just the light, steady and patient, illuminating a room that felt occupied despite being empty. I live alone, I said, to no one. The words sounded rehearsed. The mirror above the sink was fogged, though the room was cold, and the condensation, a single clear patch, had been wiped clean at eye level, not my height. I didn't clean it. I stepped back and turned the light off. That night, I dreamed of sitting on the floor of my bedroom while someone paced around me, careful not to step on my hands. Each time I looked up, the dream blurred, as if my mind refused to finish rendering her, but I felt her attention like weight pressing gently between my shoulders. When I woke, my bedroom door was closed. I never closed it. The fear didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in gradually, Deluded by familiarity, that was the worst part. How normal it began to feel, how my thoughts adjusted to include her without resistance. She doesn't like the overhead light. She stands too close to the sink. She listens when you cry. I caught myself thinking the breaking point came quietly. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my own tired eyes, when the glass warmed beneath my fingertips. Another hand, invisible but unmistakable, pressed flat against the mirror from the other side, aligning perfectly with mine, not grabbing, not threatening, matching. I didn't scream, I didn't pull away. I watched as my reflection smiled, and a half-second later, so did I. I stopped using mirrors, not deliberately. At first it happened the way habits die quietly, without ceremony. One day I realized I'd been washing my hands while staring at the tiles instead of my reflection. Another day, I brushed my teeth with my eyes half closed, focused on the sink drain. The small spiral of water pulling foam away. Mirrors had started to feel accurate, not wrong. Worse than that, incomplete. It wasn't that my reflection lagged behind or moved on its own. That would have been easier. That would have been something I could point to and say there. No. The problem was subtler. My reflection looked like me, but it didn't feel like it was confirming my presence anymore, as if it was checking, waiting to see whether I still belonged there. The apartment had settled into a new routine, one that no longer included surprise. The footsteps were consistent now, predictable, always the same soft pressure on the floorboards, always the same pauses. Whoever or whatever was sharing this space with me had learned the rhythms of the place and mine. I knew when it would move. I could feel it, the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes, a tightening in the air, a subtle shift in attention. It never touched me. That was almost worse. Instead, it left evidence that felt intentional. My mug moved from the counter to the table, handle turned inward the way I preferred. The chair across from my bed pulled out slightly, as if someone had stood and forgotten to push it back. In the bathroom, light switched off after I left it on, but only if I was gone long enough to notice. It was no longer hiding, it was coexisting. I tried not to react, tried to behave as though nothing was wrong, because some part of me believed that acknowledgement was a kind of permission. But suppression takes effort, and effort draws attention. One evening, I came home later than usual. The hallway lights flickered as I unlocked the door, the buzz louder than I remembered. The apartment smelled different when I stepped inside, cleaner, sharper, like something had been aired out. I hadn't cleaned. My shoes were lined up neatly by the door. I'm not neat. I kicked them off and stood there longer than necessary, listening. The familiar hum of the building, the distant sounds of traffic, and beneath it all, the subtle sense of occupancy. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. My voice sounded strange in the apartment, thinner than I expected. It didn't echo. I waited, nothing moved. No footsteps, no shift in pressure. But the air felt attentive, like I'd spoken during a pause in conversation. I went into the kitchen and stopped. The table was set for two, not elaborately, not theatrically. Just 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses of water. The placement was careful, balanced, as if someone had thought about symmetry. My stomach tightened, but not with panic. With recognition. This wasn't meant to scare me, this was meant to normalize. I sat down slowly, choosing my usual chair. The other one faced me. Empty. Expectant. Is this how you want it? I asked. The words came out steadier than I felt. The light above the table flickered once, just once, exhaled through my nose and ate. The food tasted the same. My appetite hadn't disappeared, which I found unsettling in its own way. I chewed carefully, aware of the space across from me, of the invisible presence occupying it. When I finished, I left both plates on the table. A test. I went to bed early, the exhaustion deep and bone heavy. Sleep came in fragments, shallow, disrupted by dreams that felt less like stories and more like impressions. Rooms overlapping, doors opening onto spaces that didn't exist in daylight. A sense of being observed, not from a distance, but from within the same boundaries. I woke before my alarm. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I lay still, listening. The hum was there, but muted, as if dampened by something closer. I turned my head slowly toward the chair by my bed. It hadn't moved, but the impression of occupancy was stronger than ever. "You're closer," I whispered. The word closer felt important. I sat up, heart steady but heavy. Whatever rules governed this situation were changing, and I had the growing sense that I was running out of the luxury of ignorance. That morning, I decided to do something I had been avoiding, decided to ask for a name. Not because I expected an answer in words, but because names are anchors. They force definition. They draw lines. I stood in the center of the living room, where the sense of presence was strongest, where the air felt thickest with attention. "I know you're here," I said. "And I think you know me." The apartment felt stiller. "I need to know what to call you." The silence stretched. Not empty. Deliberate. For a moment, I thought nothing would happen. Then very gently the pressure in the room shifted. Not toward me, but around me, like a breath taken in reverse. A sensation brushed the edge of my thoughts. Not a word. Not a sound. An impression. A name. Almost. It slid past my awareness too quickly to catch, like trying to remember a word you know, but can't quite reach. My head throbbed, sharp and sudden. "No," I said quickly. "Slower. Please." The air tightened. That was when I understood something crucial. It wasn't refusing. It couldn't. Whatever was sharing this space with me didn't have a name in the way people do. It didn't think in labels. It existed in relation, proximity, habit, repetition. It was defined by being here, by being with, and I was trying to force it into language. The headache worsened, looming behind my eyes. The room felt slightly off-center, like the walls had shifted a few degrees without moving. "I won't do that again," I said, backing toward the couch. "I'm sorry." The pressure eased, but something else lingered. A residue of intent. That afternoon, I found the door. It was in the hallway, between the bathroom and the bedroom. A narrow door I was certain hadn't been there before. Painted the same off-white as the walls, handle dull and unremarkable. I stood in front of it for a long time. The apartment felt cautious, not warning me away. Watching to see what I would do. My hand hovered over the handle. "This wasn't here," I said. The hum deepened. Almost imperceptibly, understood then that this door wasn't new. It had always been there. I just hadn't been allowed to notice it. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I stepped back, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of implication. Rooms don't appear without reason. Spaces don't reveal themselves unless something is ready. Either I was taught, or it was. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the presence settle closer than ever before. Not touching, not invading, but aligning. Like two objects finally placed side by side after being kept apart too long. For the first time since this began, a thought surfaced that terrified me more than any unseen movement or unexplained sound. What if I'm not the host? What if this apartment was never meant to be lived in alone? And what if the invisible roommate wasn't moving in but waiting for me to remember that I already had? By the 9th night, I stopped pretending I lived alone. It wasn't fear that convinced me. Fear would have been easier. Fear is loud. This was quieter, an erosion. Small things kept changing in ways I couldn't argue with. The chair by the window was never where I left it. Not moved far, just angled slightly, as if someone had sat down and stood up again without thinking to push it back. The bathroom mirror fogged after my showers in places my breath hadn't touched. Sometimes, when I returned home late, the air inside felt used, like a room after a long conversation that had ended badly. I tried tests. Petty, desperate ones. I stacked books against my bedroom door before sleeping. In the morning, They were still there undisturbed, but the handle was warm. Sprinkled flour across the kitchen floor one night, hating myself for how stupid it felt. By morning, the floor was clean. Too clean. The faint footprint I expected wasn't there. Neither was the flour I'd definitely left near the sink. IT was learning. The worst part wasn't that something invisible was sharing my space. IT was that it behaved like someone who believed it belonged there. One evening, I came home shaking from the cold, soaked by rain. My coat hit the floor. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, gathering the courage to cross the room. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice thin. "We need rules." The word slipped out before I could stop it. The apartment didn't respond, but the hum I'd begun to notice deepened slightly, like a breath taken in acknowledgement. "I don't know what you are," I continued, "but this is my apartment. You don't touch my things. You don't watch me sleep." The light above the kitchen flickered once, not violently, not threateningly, correctively. That night, I dreamed I was standing in my bedroom while someone else slept in my body. I tried to scream, but the sound belonged to them, not me. When I woke, my throat hurt. Days passed. Or maybe fewer than I thought. Time had started skipping, like a scratched record. I'd lose hours and find them later folded into strange places. An email sent I didn't remember writing. Dishes washed I didn't remember dirtying. Sentences in my journal that ended mid-thought in handwriting that was almost mine. I stopped telling people I was tired. Stopped telling people anything. The thing, the roommate, if I dared name it, grew bolder as I shrank. It began anticipating me. Lights turned on just before I entered rooms. The kettle warmed before I reached for it. Music I didn't remember liking played softly from my speakers, always stopping when I noticed. IT wasn't haunting me. IT was accommodating me. One night, I caught myself setting an extra place at the table, stood there for a long time, staring at the second plate, my hands trembling. Then I laughed too hard, too fast, and shoved it back into the cupboard. "I'm not disappearing," I told the empty room. The room felt patient. That was when I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. It wasn't trying to replace me. IT was waiting for me to make room, and somewhere, beneath the hum and the silence and the gentle corrections of my life, I understood something far worse than fear. The longer I stayed, the easier it became not to be needed at all. By the 10th night, I stopped pretending the apartment belonged to me. I woke before dawn to the sound of breathing, slow, patient, and far too close. Not beside my bed, not behind the door. Inside the room itself, as if the walls had learned how to inhale. I lay still, counting the seconds between each breath, and realized something was wrong. The rhythm matched mine. I sat up. The breathing continued. When I held my breath, the room hesitated, then continued anyway, just slightly out of sync, like someone who had practiced being me but never quite perfected it. I whispered, "You don't have to hide anymore." The words felt rehearsed. I don't remember deciding to say them. The lamp flickered on without my touch. In its weak glow, I saw signs I had been ignoring. A second indentation on the couch cushion, faint but permanent. A coffee mug I never remembered washing, always warm when I found it. Notes in my handwriting that used phrases I never would. "You're safe here. You don't have to be alone." "I am alone," I said. The air beside the bookshelf thickened, bending slightly, like heat above asphalt. Not a shape. Not a figure. Just a presence, the suggestion of someone occupying the space I had left empty. "You don't feel alone," it answered. Its voice wasn't sound. It was recognition. Memories surfaced that weren't memories. Me crying in this apartment weeks before I moved in. Me promising out loud that I'd never leave again. Me begging the silence to stay. I understood then, with a dull, crushing clarity, that it hadn't followed me here, had made room for it. "You're not my roommate," I said. "You're what stayed when everyone else left." The presence didn't deny IT. IT moved not closer, not farther but deeper, settling into the apartment the way dust settles into carpet, the way habits settle into bones. I felt it when I blinked, when I breathed, when I thought of leaving and immediately couldn't remember where I would go. "You gave me a name," it said gently. "You called me when you thought no one was listening." I tried to remember that moment. I couldn't. The mirrors in the hallway reflected me imperfectly now, my expressions delayed, softened, as if something else was learning how to wear them. I touched my face and felt a faint resistance, like touching glass from the wrong side. Panic rose, sharp and useless. "What do you want?" A pause. "Not for effect. For consideration. To stay." The answer wasn't threatening. That was the worst part. I packed a bag anyway. Hands shaking, heart racing, I shoved clothes inside, keys, my phone. Every movement felt like wading through memory instead of space. The door stood open, patient, but the hallway beyond it looked unfamiliar, longer, dimmer, shaped like a place that didn't expect me to use it. I stepped forward, the apartment exhaled, not a sound. A release. Suddenly I understood what it would cost to leave. Not pain, not death, not anything dramatic. Just erosion. Names slipping first. Then reasons. Then the sense that I had ever belonged anywhere else. I dropped the bag. "I can't take you with me," I whispered. "You don't have to," it replied. "You already brought me here." The realization landed quietly, like snow. There was no final struggle, no scream, no moment anyone would later point to and say that's when she disappeared. I sat on the couch. The indentation beside me deepened, familiar and warm. The apartment felt complete. Weeks later, maybe months, someone new toured the place. I watched from the corner of the room, not invisible, just unnoticed. The walls listened. The air learned their breathing. The agent smiled and said, "It's very quiet here." The new tenant nodded. "That's what I like about it." I wanted to warn them, but I couldn't remember the words, and somewhere between the walls and the waiting, the apartment made room again, not for another body, but for another silence willing to stay. I don't remember when I stopped being afraid. That is the last truth I can still recognize as mine. Days pass, if they are days. Light enters the apartment and leaves again, but it no longer feels like time moving forward. It feels like time circling, careful not to disturb what has settled here. I move through the rooms, performing habits without origins, washing a cup I don't recall using, straightening a chair no one sat in, speaking aloud just to hear a voice confirm that something still exists. Sometimes, the apartment answers, not in words. In agreement. I notice the changes slowly. My reflection no longer startles me because it rarely appears when I expect it to. Photographs on my phone blur, then empty themselves, faces dissolving first, names following. Contacts vanish. Messages remain unanswered because there is no longer anyone certain enough to reply. I try to write my name on paper. Halfway through, my hand hesitates. The letters feel unnecessary. The presence never rushes me. It doesn't need to. It occupies the spaces I abandon, memories I stop checking, thoughts I decide are too heavy to finish. When I forget a detail, it holds it for me. When I stop caring whether something was ever mine, it quietly takes responsibility. Rest, it suggests not as a command, but as relief. I sit. I listen. I stay. One evening, if it is evening, I realize I can no longer remember the sound of my own voice from before this place. I open my mouth to test it, but what comes out feels practiced, neutral, already familiar to the room. The apartment feels full now, complete, somewhere far away. A life continues without me. A name goes unused. A space at a table remains empty, then stops being noticed. No one searches long. There is nothing dramatic about forgetting. It happens the way dust settles, layer by layer, until the shape beneath is no longer visible. the final thing I lose is the question of why, and when that goes, there is nothing left to resist with. The apartment breathes easily. IT has learned everything it needs, long after much later than anyone would count. A new tenant stands in the doorway. They pause, just briefly, feeling something they can't explain. The air is warm. The silence is deep, feels lived in, they say. The apartment does not correct them. IT only makes space, and whatever I thought I needed to be remains here, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as something quieter and far more permanent. The part that stayed when leaving stopped mattering. They say the apartment is empty now. No strange noises. No missing things, but sometimes, when the lights are off, the space between rooms feels occupied, like someone is standing still, listening, waiting for another Lefido slowly forget it was ever alone.